One day in the bustling city of Umuahia, something happened that left everyone, even the most familiar faces, speechless. Nena had watched from the other side of the playground as her little sister, Adaora, was pushed around by a group of girls. But Nena did nothing. She just turned away, choosing not to get involved. That moment shocked everyone who saw. It made people wonder what could cause one sister to ignore another in such a desperate time of need. Could family ever be so distant? What could possibly be so wrong? If you've ever wondered how sibling rivalry could grow so deep, here's the story of how two sisters learned a powerful lesson about the unbreakable bond of family. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Let's continue. The Okoro family, by all appearances, was the picture of happiness. Mr. and Mrs. Okoro were a well-respected couple in Umuahia. Known for their kindness and strong family values, they were the proud parents of two daughters, Nena, 12, and Adaora, 10. Both parents loved their girls dearly and went out of their way to make sure they felt equally valued and cherished. When they bought toys or clothes, they always bought two of the same, hoping that treating them equally would make each daughter feel special and loved. But for Nena and Adaora, being treated the same wasn't something they wanted. Nena, at 12, felt that her status as the older sister deserved a bit more recognition. She was mature, responsible, and wanted to be seen as the big sister. Meanwhile, Adaora, carefree and full of youthful energy, didn't understand why she couldn't enjoy her own separate identity without her sister's shadow over her. One day, their mother bought them matching red dresses. She chose them with care, thinking the girls would look beautiful together, like a pair of dazzling stars. But when the girls saw the dresses, their reactions couldn't have been more different from what she'd imagined. Nena rolled her eyes, crossing her arms defiantly. Adaora, noticing her sister's reaction, also refused to wear the dress. They didn't want to be seen as twins or feel obligated to match. At school, their differences became even more noticeable. Since Nena was in a higher grade, they didn't share classes, and both preferred it that way. They went out of their way to avoid each other. When classmates asked if they were sisters, they often replied, "No, she's just another student." It was confusing for their friends, but to Nena and Adaora, denying each other was their way of establishing independence. At home, Mr. and Mrs. Okoro noticed the tension between the girls. They had been close once, but now they were acting more like rivals than sisters. Every meal was filled with small arguments over things as silly as who would sit closest to their mum or who got served first. They even began to compete over small tasks, each one trying to prove she was the better sister. One evening, their father sat them down, his voice gentle yet firm, as he tried to get through to them. "Family is all we have, girls. One day when you're older, you'll understand that there's no bond stronger than that between sisters," he said, his eyes filled with sadness. Their mother chimed in, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "Sisters should be best friends. No one else will be there like family. You're lucky to have each other," she added, her voice a mixture of love and frustration. She just couldn't understand why her daughters were pushing each other away. But no matter how much their parents pleaded and tried to show them the importance of family, Nena and Adaora would nod, pretending to listen, only to go back to their distant ways soon after. The tension in the Okoro household grew thicker, with their parents often feeling torn and heartbroken over their daughters' constant bickering. At times, Mr. and Mrs. Okoro would argue over how best to handle the situation, each blaming themselves, wondering where they had gone wrong. Then came a day that no one in the family would ever forget. It was recess at school, and Adaora was out in the courtyard, laughing and talking with her friends. Suddenly, a group of older kids started to bully her. They pushed her, called her names, and laughed as she tried to fight back tears. Nena saw everything from across the yard. She stood there watching as her little sister was teased and hurt, but instead of running over to help, She just stood there, frozen with a mix of anger and pride. A part of her felt that Adaora was finally getting what she deserved for being so annoying. It was a feeling she knew wasn't right, but she couldn't shake it. Out of nowhere, another classmate named Cheek rushed to Adaora's side. He pushed the bullies away and helped Adaora stand up, even as she wiped her tears and tried to be brave. Cheek looked around, and his eyes landed on Nena, who was still standing there watching. "Why didn't you help her?" Cheek asked, his voice full of disappointment. Nena had no answer. She felt a strange twist in her heart, and for the first time she wondered why she hadn't done anything. Adaora didn't say a word to Nena as they walked home that day. That evening, when Mr. and Mrs. Okoro heard about what happened, they were heartbroken. They called Nena into the living room and asked, "Nanena, why didn't you help your sister?" Nanena didn't know what to say. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "We raised you both to love and support each other. What went wrong?" Mr. Okoro shook his head, his voice low. "Family means standing by each other, even when things are hard. We don't understand why you would stand there and do nothing." Hearing her parents so sad made Nena feel a pang of guilt. She had never seen them look so disappointed. But as much as she felt bad, her pride kept her from saying sorry. She went to bed that night, feeling a mix of sadness and anger she didn't understand. One evening in the family's living room, the air was heavy with disappointment. After their parents heard Nena and Adaora arguing as usual, Mr. Okoro, usually gentle and calm, couldn't hide the sadness in his eyes. He looked at his daughters, shaking his head as he spoke. "Nena Adaora," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Family is all we have in this world. No one else will stand by you like your family. Sisters are supposed to protect each other, to be there in times of trouble." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "It hurts us to see you both act like strangers." Their mother added, her voice soft yet firm, "Life is unpredictable, and sometimes all we have is the love of those closest to us. We want you to understand that." The girls nodded, feeling guilty, but old habits were hard to break. They tried, but every small disagreement pushed them further apart. Mr. and Mrs. Okoro, in the privacy of their room, worried over their daughter's behavior. They feared that this strain might one day affect their family's happiness. The love in the Okoro household felt clouded by the growing tension between Nena and Adaora. Everything changed one late afternoon. It was a Friday afternoon. Nena and Adaora were on their way home from school when they stopped by the marketplace to buy snacks. It was a busy, bustling place filled with vendors, shoppers, and people hurrying past. In the crowd, Adaora got distracted by a colourful display and wandered off, leaving Nena's side. Moments later, Nena realized her sister was gone and looked around, but she could not find her. Something was off. She walked faster, scanning the marketplace, squeezing past the market-goers, calling out for Adaora, but there was no answer. A strange panic began to rise in her throat. She rounded the corner herself, scanning the area, but Adaora was nowhere to be seen. Just as Nena turned back toward the crowd to look for help, she heard a faint, muffled sound, almost like someone calling her name. She pushed her way between two market stalls toward the sound, her heart pounding. As she came closer, she saw her sister's familiar pink headband lying abandoned on the ground near a parked van, and her stomach dropped. The next sound was unmistakable, a soft cry, a voice she knew well. "Nena, help!" Without thinking, Nena sprinted toward the van, and there she found Adaora being pulled by a man who was trying to force her into the back. A surge of fierce protectiveness and fear rushed through her, and before she could even process what was happening, she shouted, "Leave her alone!" Her voice cracked, but it was loud enough to draw the attention of nearby shoppers. The man froze, momentarily startled, and in that split second, Nena grabbed her sister's arm with all her strength, pulling her free. Adaora stumbled, almost falling, but Nena steadied her, keeping a firm grip on her as they backed away. The man gave them one last menacing look before disappearing into the crowd. Adaora clung to Nena, sobbing, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. Nena felt a strange mixture of anger, relief, and guilt. The sight of her sister so terrified, so vulnerable, struck something deep within her. Nena couldn't shake the image of Adaora's frightened face from her mind. They held onto each other tightly, neither one saying a word as they walked away from the market. It was as if they both understood without needing to say it, that they had almost lost something irreplaceable. The experience left them both shaken, and they walked home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. That night, as the two girls lay in their shared bedroom, neither could sleep. The silence felt different, heavy with the weight of what had almost happened. Nena turned to Adaora, feeling a rush of emotion she couldn't ignore. "I'm sorry, Adaora," Nena whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't mean to be a bad sister." Adaora, her eyes filled with tears, looked at her older sister with a mix of relief and sadness. She had always felt like she was in Nena's shadow, but in that moment, she saw a side of her sister she hadn't seen before. "It's okay, Nena. I am sorry too," Adaora replied softly. "Thank you for saving me." In the dim light, they held hands, feeling a newfound closeness. It wasn't something they needed to talk about further. The promise was unspoken but understood. They knew from that night forward they would be each other's protector, no matter what. From that day on, Nena and Adaora's relationship transformed. They began walking to school together, sitting beside each other at lunch and talking like friends. Their parents, watching this change, were overjoyed, feeling as if a weight had been lifted. The Okora household was once again filled with laughter and warmth. Moral of the story: family is the strongest bond we have. Even when we argue, our family is there to protect, support, and love us through thick and thin. Nena and Adaora learned that family is everything, and sometimes it takes a moment of fear to truly see what matters. For anyone reading, remember, family is a gift, and it's up to us to cherish it. Thanks for watching. Did you enjoy the video? Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Drop a comment and share your thoughts. See you next time.